right. Hello, everyone. I'm Leslie Powers here for Dissolving the Divide, here with my co-partner, Derek Bartolicelli. Hello, Derek.
Hey Leslie, how's it going? We have
Good.
Sarah Cross in the house, and
Yeah. Hey,
Hey guys.
Sarah.
she wrote a wonderful piece for us, just in a paragraphical way of notes and just stream of thoughts about this whole subject that we're gonna delve into since May of this year, 2023, and after our long, summer break or whatever people want to call it, it's great to have, be back on track, and been looking forward to this for a while. And since the time that, we've kind of got the ball rolling on this subject, yeah, things have been coming up within the media, and there's been writers' strikes and things of chat GPT and yada yada with augmented or artificial intelligence and whatever relevance to this transhumanist movement in and of itself. But, putting that aside, Sarah Cross is a wonderful artist of many different uh varieties of skill sets. She can paint, write, draw,
So,
sew, and make clothes and fabric, and that kind of stuff. She's taking on, certain commissions and missions, if you're willing to inquire about those things later about that towards the end. But yeah, Sarah, without further ado, how are you doing on this 14th of October 2023? Mon
Pretty
ami.
good. Thank you. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
yeah. And I'll just add you're a student of natural law, a philosopher, and starting to do more communications out in the world. So it seems like you blend your art with the natural law concepts. And today we're going to talk about the divisions around art and creativity. And this was a topic that you brought up that's important to you. So I'd really like for you to share a little bit about anything more about yourself you'd like us to know, and what brings this topic to the table for you.
Um, well, I don't really know how to share how I started becoming an artist. I mean, I guess it was always something I just did from a young age. But it was easily something that was prompted because I spent a lot of time alone as a child, just due to reasons, unforeseeable natural anomaly reasons. But so it just kind of developed, and my interest kind of went in different sorts of paths and ways. And it's like, I kind of had the idea set into me. It's like you need to at least try everything once. So I guess I took that all the way to everything. So it's like, it was like with food, really. That's usually like how parents get you to learn how to like stuff. You have to try at least everyone once. But I did that with art. And like, so I've kind of, dabbled in most art. And then some I find I don't like, and some I do. And like what Derek was saying is mostly my background is drawing and some painting. And mostly sewing. Most of my art does come in the form of, fabric work as a seamstress for the last 20 years. But and I did a little bit of writing as a kid, but not anything too serious. And the last probably 5 or 6 years, I kind of felt like I needed to, I had enough experience in my life and my personal experiences as far as my knowledge goes. And, with my study of my research with history and all that kind of stuff, and with my skill set. So I thought I should do something more than just make crap all day.
Hmm. So now you have art with purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you brought up this idea, this observation in the world that that art has changed, right? That the way that art is taught, what is considered art, the idea of having artists even that are identifiable to the public is really transformed and been like in some ways taken over by another type of artistic work that's like maybe more technological or more online, more AI. Like there's, and I wanted you to share a little more about what you're observing and what your concerns are about that.
Okay. Well, here's the thing. If there's anybody who studies like art history or just even general history, you'd see a pattern that in all the way back, as far as we have any kind of documented type of history, whether it's pictorial or written or whatever, art is all manner of different kinds of things. It's painting, it's drawing, it's writing, it's science, it's math, it's astrology, or astronomy. Just understanding its grammar, its language. These are all different forms of art. It's put together in pieces where we can communicate with each other, and that's what art is. Art is communication. And so all the way back up in time until, let's say, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, maybe even a little bit longer than that, art started going off the rails where it's being used as some kind of like weapon in the way that I see it. Even art schools are like just, I can't even imagine people wasting their time in art schools, honestly. I mean, so it's like how art, excuse me, traditionally, art is used as a teaching tool. No matter what you're teaching, that's what it's for. Art is used to teach truth, essentially. So when people start doing, and it's good to have like many years of practice and just doing nonsense and learning how to do things. That's how you learn. That's how you learn how to like, come into your own and actually create something that's authentic and something that actually spells out a message. So it doesn't have to be written out for it to be a communication tool. And if you look at our like classic artists in history, the people we look up to as artists, they are not just painters. They're people who studied everything. They studied art and painting. They studied herbology. They studied sciences. They studied engineering. They studied the sky.
Human anatomy.
They studied human anatomy. They were scholars. It was a completely different brand of artists than what we have in the modern world. So it's just, I can't, like, it's funny kind of looking at like a group of artists and then picking out the ones who be like, okay, this person over here, they're doing art because they're wanting to fit into some sort of clique. And so they're going with a certain kind of, popularity trend that's making it, popular, where everyone's going to go, ooh, I love your green hair, and then this guy over here, you're looking at him and he's like, this guy draws, and he draws all day, every day. And that is the difference between somebody who's doing something just because they want to be part of some kind of a cliquey group, or somebody who actually just sits there and draws and wants to know how to hone in the skill.
Right.
You see more passion and will force behind the difference between those two. Yeah.
Well, there's a different kinds of focus. It's a different kind of focus.
Right.
Like there's, art, most of the artists that I knew when I was a kid, like if the artists I knew, they're like this, they're like, I'm focused on, that's what I'm doing.
It's like
Um,
deeply becoming a craftsman or craftsperson, so to speak, you know,
yeah,
to go beyond sort of the superficial, but the deeper that you study and practice, then you become another level, I guess, like a musician, right? You know, an expert in this particular way of communicating through a medium,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, like a lot of artists, like you can even, well, like Leonardo da Vinci, for one, who I like read quite a bit about. He has paintings where he's drawn on the canvas and then he draws over that, and then he draws over that, and then he gets rid of this and he gets rid of that before he gets like to the final piece. And that's what, you know, artists who are actually studying art do. When you have somebody who comes in and um there, I mean, not that I care how people dress or dye their hair or whatever, I don't care about that, but if they're more focused about how they look other than the craft, then that's like a sign there that, you know, maybe they're not focused on the work itself.
Yeah.
It's more focused on the external instead of the internal, where it first comes from, which
Mhm.
is that heart-based intelligence, not that artificial intelligence, which is kind of
Yeah.
what some of these unfortunate, you know, school curriculums of art class have, as you mentioned in your, you know, show notes for us, you know, you alluded to quite a bit. And going back to just, yeah, I can't go back to it because I forgot, but yeah, because you made a lot of good points, and yeah.
Yeah. I'm my brain's kind of popping all over, so I want to try
Oh,
to
yeah.
stay focused, because you brought up the point about some really deep points, actually, about the importance of art, right? You know, because in my mind I was thinking about, well, the value to an individual of doing art, right, for art's sake, as an expression. So that's one aspect of art.
Mhm.
And then the other, though, that you really mentioned was much more of a societal value, in a sense, of art as a way of communicating truth, and that art goes hand in hand with other aspects of seeking, of knowledge seeking and truth seeking, and that artists are creators of symbols and sigils, in a sense, you know, that do make an impact on people's consciousness. And I think that's what's kind of being diluted, right? From someone's attainment of knowledge and then expressing and sharing that with the world, versus the system sort of telling you that these little techniques that you have to do it this way, or you're going to work with AI, something created through someone else's agenda almost. I mean, am I following?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the way I see it, you know, spirit or God or source or that which set all things in motion, to me, I don't care what people call it. This is a creative force of nature, period. And it's, you know, it drops fractions of itself into us, these little physical manifested vehicles, and creating more art, which is in itself an artist that then creates more art. It is a pay it for system. So, like, if it's coming from the authentic self and the individual is paying attention to that inner self, then all art is authentic. All art is helping to create reality, because everything we have around us has been created. So it's funny talking about AI art and AI generated art, and somebody was saying that my husband made a comment that somebody asked him some bizarre question about AI art killing art. You know, art is dead, real art is dead, you know, AI is taking over, or whatever it was. But the thing is like, even AI art, all that's doing is pulling artwork that's already been put on the internet and piecing stuff together. So if you put into it, you know, you can't kill art because it's really just plagiarizing off of other artists. And so if you say, I want to, you know, I want a picture of a penguin vampire, you know, on a roller coaster, that's what it's going to pull from like several other pieces of artwork that's already been on the internet. So it can't create art. AI cannot create art. It is plagiarizing
Yeah.
the art of several other artists. That's how AI art works.
Right.
So
So it's taking away, though, the credit of individual artists.
yeah,
It's almost
Yeah.
like trying to erase the individual as a creator of art, and just sort of steal actually from their work and
yeah,
create it in this hodgepodge that's somewhat random. I don't know how, or programmed, right? It's
yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I'm gonna post a couple videos that are going to be in the show notes that kind of go over some of this stuff, including copyrights and infringements and this whole gray area between like, oh, well, it's kind of the same as blah, blah, blah that's been done in the past with using other people's, artistry, whatever, and Creative Commons. And we have this whole YouTubery going on with, anyone posting videos, and they're and I've been guilty as well. I'm sorry, like any artist that I've used your artwork to put some YouTube thumbnail that was really cool, and I hope you feel honored by that. And if I could compensate y'all in any kind of way, get to me, at Awakening Mind on YouTube or 7 other platforms that we're on where we post these videos as well. And it ain't hard to tell that, the algorithms and AI is a part of this whole social media stuff. If you look at some of these videos, I mean, this was kind of, as they call, like the first phase of, implementing our AI or whatever, and the algorithms and all this stuff to favor certain behavior of people's, actions, reactions, whatever. I mean, these are kind of tests. And if you go deeper into the whole historicity of just the internet of a whole, smartphones and all this, you have DARPA, government, with monopolistic corporations all tied into each other. And you want to factor in things that people don't even mention these days, which is like mega monolithic corporations that are got their tentacles in everything, not just the Bill Gateses and the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and all those cats, but on the eastern side of things, you got Tencent, which is a Chinese corporation that's delving into all things, including Reddit and social media things, TikTok and blah blah blah. Facial recognition, that's just something that people really got to be concerned about. And there are good reasons why there are people trying to block these things. But I know I'm kind of going off on a tangent away from what we're getting more into, which is the whole artistry versus AI and the infringement upon sovereign individual artists' original works that are just what it is. And like, I'm sure you're familiar, Sarah, with like deviant art that's been
yeah,
online for a long time.
it's a website, isn't it? Yeah, they
Yeah.
have some nice art up.
What
Yeah.
is unique about that? I am not familiar with that.
It's just an old website, and it's got I don't know if it's a collection of artists or if it's just one artist, but they just have a bunch of different art on there from a bunch of different sources.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
it'd be very easy for something like AI to go in and just pick.
Boop, boop, boop. Yeah.
Yeah.
I had a question for you based on a comment you made about art schools, and really seeing that these days, that from your point of view, you wouldn't even recommend art school. And I wonder, could you share a little more about that, of what is happening in the education system?
Well, I mean, this is just really my opinion about it, but I feel like art school is kind of this trap for young people, and it's easy to fall into that trap because you've got people who are just not artists, but they want to encourage their youth, like, oh, you're an artist, you should go to art school. And usually people who are not, of the mindset to, or inclined to be more artistic, they don't understand how difficult it can actually be to be an artist. So, but they want to encourage their youth, and they don't necessarily understand how toxic the art school industry actually is. And like people like Leonardo da Vinci had an art school, but it was more like of an apprentice base type of thing. And like you had to be accepted by him as like, oh, okay, I've got to see, we'll give you a couple of months and I got to see if you've actually got, the natural inclination to, like, if you can do a couple of things, where you're moving in the right direction, and I can see how you're putting, focus into it, and it's not just, some passing fancy, then, you can be, studying under me. But in art schools today, like any other industry, all you have to do is pay your way. And so it doesn't matter if you actually have any true intent or true interest in it. Anybody can just go do whatever career they want to without even having an interest in it. All you have to do is pay for it. But what they do in art schools, and I've talked to many people who I know who, I mean, I did a small amount of art school, college, and pre-college, and I'm just like, I just did not enjoy it. I didn't like the people. I didn't like my instructors, not because I'm contrary, but because it's like, why are you trying to conform art? Like, it doesn't always have to be science books, or just
conform art. What do you mean? Like everyone needs to do the kind of same thing?
Yeah, like this looks like this looks like this, without any branching of like imagination, like
cookie cutter curriculums. What?
Right. Yeah, like saying like, oh, if you're gonna draw whale, like a herd of whales, you have to draw them in the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, but I mean, I saw one kid, he was maybe 12 years old, and he's drawing, and he had this beautiful landscape, like cityscape, and he had these whales in the sky who were flying, and it was stunning. It was a beautiful piece of artwork. I mean, 12 years old, and like you'd think he'd been drawing for like 40 years.
Yeah.
So like this is the kind of kid who'd have a natural, inclination to do it. But with art schools today, what they like to do is, and I've talked to many people who are my generation who have been to art school and out of art school, and they're like, I really wish I hadn't even wasted my time or my money or my energy on that. And like half the assignments they would send me on to do, they would just tell me to go to this place and copy it and call it my own.
Wow.
As like a regular standard. And I'm like, well, that's plagiarism. I mean, like with that kind of stuff, like with art, it's like they had to put the rule set. If it's like 30% different than it is in plagiarism, technically, legally, which is fine. Art inspires other art, and whatever, but that's fine.
People who can pull off some big heists, if you know how to copy art well.
Right. But like the fashion industry, the fashion art schools are even worse. They're worse. And so it's just a lot of the teachers who go into being art teachers, maybe, when they're young, they're more genuine. They want to encourage the youth. They want to create art. They want to show how it's done. And that's nice. But then a lot of art teachers that I've met, they're not even artists. They're pulling out a textbook and they're telling you how to do it this way. And that's not how you do art. And, recently you've got the whole woke agenda, and it's, in every single facet of everywhere. It's churning out these, young kids who barely even understand who they are. And they are being conditioned into this one type of mold of uniqueness. But that uniqueness is really this, it's disguised. It's like conformity, really, because now they're all the same.
Yeah, totally.
So,
And that's what it seems like. Sorry to, if you want to continue, go for it. Sorry.
oh, it's okay, go on, Derek.
I was gonna say, like, that's exactly where the trajectory of the transhumanist agenda is kind of going towards, this androgynous way of life, and how people just kind of drudge through life. It doesn't seem to have much soul in it, or that activated animus or anima. And are people really animated within their imagination or their imagination, and what school kind of tends to funnel out of, in a sense, like you were saying, like, yeah, in the earlier stages, yeah, they're kind of encouraging. Like, yeah, I remember in school and even seeing, recent pictures of, mothers posting things on Facebook or whatever, fathers like, hey, my kid drew this and whatever, and like, they're kind of free to draw whatever sometimes, but they could be in trouble, whatever, there could be restraints. But it seems like there's more leeway in the earlier stages, like kindergarten to like first, second, third grade, and then it's kind of like, you're gonna get funneled into like something more generic, or like, this is the way to do it. And yeah, there's more emphasis on, all the like politically correct
Yeah, I was
crapola.
gonna say that. Yeah, yeah.
They're go on, Leslie.
I was just going to comment on that, the censorship that it impacts art, and that politically correct way of making something that then is puts you out for criticism or bad reviews or whatever if you deviate and do something very original or political, a statement,
Yeah. And as I put in the, like, later on in the notes, like, as far as I see it, art should never be a tool for any kind of political gain, ever. Because that's what art schools are really churning out, is these little political robot golems. And they're all thinking in this way where it's kind of tricking them into thinking they're all like really inclusive or diverse or whatever. But it's teaching them how to use discrimination and hate in a way where you're afraid to like say anything against. I mean, I'm not, but most people are afraid to say anything against that because of the way, just because of the way that it's worded or viewed, or because of the way the person looks. And the bigger problem is, in art school, most art students are not coming out with any kind of art history as a background. And all art students should have some art history background. Like, that's how we learn. That's how we learn how to move forward as an artist. Yeah. We don't just learn from our own mistakes and our own lessons. We learn from the past as well.
Right.
And you can learn about those things. Sorry, Leslie, real quick. The old school little plug-in. Sarah, you spoke with Brandon Spencer, one of our good common friends and a former guest on Dissolving the Divide. And you spoke with him for like 5 hours about Da Vinci, Mona Lisa, and all these, things, from way beyond yesteryear. You have to go centuries back, where some art studies lack on, having emphasis on that. And this is the magnum opus of people's life's work that we're talking about, not just some little thing that they created, through some keyword plugins. And we have this, AI or even CGI. There's so many semantics revolving around AI and all this stuff, and having a little play on words. I mean, like, AI, artificial intelligence, or augmented intelligence, people want to say. What about artificial intel, artificial information, artificial invasion, algorithmic interference, augmented insanity? And if you break it down numerically, AI is 19. And what do we have in the year of 2019 of a certain COVID variety? And if you want to get more esoteric with it, you reverse the word COVID, you have Devok, which is a demonic entity, with 19 as AI. So what is that involved in, and why such the emphasis on the needlecraft thereafter? Anyways, transhumanism, but why can we not just flip the script on the solutions more towards the end? But it's all about, all right, I'm down with AI in the sense of being an activated individual, having that heart-based intelligence where the true artful expression of truth resides within the seat of the soul. And like there's so many ways that people can, have these expressions of art through music and writing, drawing, whatever, painting, and all these things. And I love how you mentioned like whales just over the city or whatever. That can mean a variety of different things. And I love how people can just, draw from their mind some abstract art, and it could, reflect so many deep things, and it could be up to the observer to, make of it as they will. But it's just about, sparking imagination and inspiration and just like deeper thought, and just like, wow, like questioning what is this like different reality of things, and like stepping into a different world of someone's artful form of expression. Like, holy smokes. And like, you're not going to get that deep with the AI rendered version of that shit. But anyways.
That's what art is. It's a communication tool, and it's meant to communicate some form, well, the truth that you understand, the truth or the message that you're trying to get through to the outside world. Sometimes you're just doing a commission piece because it's like, you're being paid for it, and it doesn't have any meaning to it. But when you're doing something for yourself, it's meant to come from within, so that can only be truth. And I'm not talking about like how I feel like this or that or whatever. It's like a message. It's a message from spirit. It's a message from your higher self, from your highest self. If you're listening and you're paying attention, and that's how I view it. It's like, it's not like, oh, I feel like, whatever. I feel like being a cat today, so I'm gonna like draw cats and bedazzle sweaters. No, it's like, if you're gonna sit down and do some art, on your own for your own sake, it's, you want to take your time with it. And I would say for any kind of budding artist out there who's even thinking about going into a career, you want to don't close yourself off. And a lot of that's what art school does. It closes people off. It turns them off.
Yeah.
And it creates this person who comes out as only body. There's no mind, there's no heart. Yeah. And so you've only got, okay, so if you look at it in terms of thought, emotion, and action, which I feel is like the utmost important. It's like you got to start everything with that thought, motion, and action in that order. And you take away even one of those elements, you're fractured, incomplete, and you're never going to be able to achieve your fullest, most complete, authentic self. You have to have all three.
Yeah.
And if you do them in the wrong order, if you do them action, thought, emotion, that's just as chaotic, because it's like doing without thinking. You're not putting any thought into it. I just, like, for me, I have like kind of a system. I'll think about something and be like, I'll have an idea about something. I'm like, okay, how do I want to do this? And I'll actually think about it for maybe even several months. And then I'll kind of organize how I feel about how I feel about that whole thing that I just put together in my head. And then I think about how I feel about, well, is this work actually going to be worth my time? Is it going to be something that actually expresses what I want to say? Or is it going to be something that's just going to turn into mishmash? And then I get to the action phase and I, put pen to paper, so to speak, and I start creating. And even sometimes halfway through that process of the action, I have to stop and be like, no, this is garbage. This was nothing. I don't even know what I was thinking. And I throw it out. And this is the process. This is what happens. And that happens, like when you're an artist, that happens more often than you producing an actual piece of artwork.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, Leonardo da Vinci, even like easily, probably 70% of his work. I don't even know if that's exactly accurate, but I'd give an estimate of at least 70% of his work was unfinished.
Right. And then when you commercialize art or you're trying to make a living on art, it works against that natural process in a lot of ways because of the economic pressure and the capitalist aspect of things. And the more capitalized, I guess, the art is, to me, it seems less authentic and deeply thought out. Yeah.
It absolutely is, and like, look what they're doing with, I don't know if they call it modern art or if they're just calling it, this is what art is. And now look what they're doing with art now. I'm like, what they're doing with our ancient art, with our, the greats artwork, our classical art, they're bouncing around our classic artist work that, did their work in the 1800s. And they're basically using it really just to store money because it can't depreciate in value. So it's not like, a Fed note where, this dollar is not going to mean the same as 100 pennies in like 10 years. But this piece of artwork that I said it, is being said as $4 million, that'll be $4 million today, tomorrow, and 100 years from now, because that's what I said it's worth. So they're really just using it to store money, or, in some cases with some of the art that they're putting out now from some of these so-called artists is just money laundering. That's what it looks like to me. And or you get some poor, dupe of a freshly out of art school student coming out and, yes, I'm so excited. I would love to take a huge commission on for the city. And then they do some like monstrosity. And you're just like, oh dear, that's like a huge statue now in the middle of the city I live in. And and it's just like it's not like some beautiful work of art, a sculpture of like, mythological creature, entity that we would read about in our ancient history, or, somebody who actually contributed to the society or to the world. And somehow it's just some like mess. It's like a mess of nonsense. It doesn't even look like anything.
And it also isn't including the input or participation of the community, right?
Yeah.
It's not representing the community even,
Not at all.
It's more some kind of political virtue signaling. But to kind of rear back in, ladies and gentlemen, Sarah, I really wanted to get your bigger perspective on, what you wrote to us in regards to your show notes about this, and like how like you started the first sentence of the first paragraph of like, one of the largest divides I see in this world today is the divide people create for themselves.
Yep, absolutely. And
how,
I've been going, Derek.
And we'll just kind of frame it in this, in this whole subject matter revolving, kind of like All right, so like the breath of the soul, that's their, the art of life of every individual in a sense. Like that's kind of where I'm getting at, as opposed to the fake generic AI type that people can fall into with this whole transhumanist movement. If you can kind of, wield those two or weave them in together in any kind of artful way, if you want to articulate, yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just it. AI has it's dead art. It's not real. It doesn't come from anything that's like based in a living entity. It's feeding like almost like this parasitic vampire off of that which is already alive. And it's like if we just stopped using it or stopped, even if we stopped caring about it, it would kind of die off and lose its popularity for AI art, and even though it's like easy and useful for some people, but it's like when you're using it to be, and then claiming that it's art is something else, but it is dead art. It's not, it doesn't have the breath of life, as you put it, where we do. We are artistic expressions of a greater source where we're creating in the physical in its stead.
Right.
So like that's the difference. Like, authentic art comes from life, comes from real life, what's actual life, and AI is just an assimilation of that. It's a copycat, or doing its best to copycat that.
It seems like so my thoughts are that there's a value to our creative process, and that process you described of going within and thinking and processing and contemplating and trying and changing, right, is a valuable process that gets bypassed or missed in the way that the current so-called art is going. If we're just going online and putting in keywords and coming up with something, we're not going through that process. So we are missing out, I think, on a part of our own personal development and our own personal evolution. And then when you add us all together, it's affecting the evolution of the society in a way, whereas society is not valuing or engaging in that internal process of creation. And the more that you are creative internally, then it's creating externally, right? So if you're using your thought and you're in alignment with your thoughts, emotions, and your artistic action, then that brings more truthful, authentic, impact on the world.
Right.
So I wanted to share that. And also the piece about the schools, where I see, like, even with my own daughter, like I see her as a really creative person. And as a little kid, she would just like have this sense of composition and just, she's always like, it comes from her and she's kind of quick in the way she does it. But when she went to an art class at school and they're not encouraging her process, but like kind of almost punishing her process by telling her to do things a certain way and then like grading, it totally discouraged her creative process. She no longer wants to do art. And I talk to a lot of people as a like psychotherapist, a counselor, and many people just feel like they're not artists, they can't make art. So art can be very therapeutic because of that internal. It can really help a person to process emotion and get clarity about themselves. And when the school system tells you that you're not an artist, and I encourage my client to do something artistic, they are like already a bit traumatized and feel like they can't do it, and they don't even try.
Yes, you're right. And I do want to differentiate, though. I mean, I want to say something on that, because you're right, Leslie. But I do want to make the I want people to understand that there is a difference between AI art. What I'm talking about is what I think we're talking about is the AI generated automatic stuff that gets pulled up. But like, music, even collage art, even digital art, those all have the same kind of authentic artistic process as somebody who's sitting down to a canvas, because you're pulling pieces of yourself from that. And that's what makes it art. That's what makes it the message that you're speaking, the language you're speaking.
Yeah.
But with schools, art schools are tragic for that. And I don't even know if most instructors know that that's what they're doing. And it does turn people off. I mean, like even my sister, she went to top of her class, super smart, mathematically, very, very intelligent, very artistically inclined, very good at drawing, with her 4 years of architecture school, and just doesn't have any interest in it whatsoever anymore.
Yeah. It's really
And she's like,
sad.
it was too much. And anytime I've had an instructor, in school, I mean, I've never really gotten along with any of them personally. Some people have really close relationships with their art school teachers, but I've just never been one of those people, as most of them have been, conformists in the art, and art should never be conformed.
Yeah. I kind of branching off of that, I wanted to differentiate around like political art, because I think to me, the most important thing is that the art, like there shouldn't be, from my point of view, censorship is a wrong, right? So every individual has the right to create whatever kind of art they want, and to put whatever message they want into their art. So a person, I think, has the right to make a political message, right? But the difference is, and coming from an individual sharing their art versus the art being exploited or made for specifically with a political purpose. I think there's a differentiation. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, you look back just, from the past 120, 30 years, where the First and Second World Wars happened, there was so much, political propaganda through cartoons and what have you, whether it be from the Soviet side, the European Western side, or American side. And whether it be true, false, or people's just, convictive feelings, and through animation about it all, like, yeah. And there were animations about it, I think, I don't know about like Disney or whatever in the early years, but there were some subtle hints, and they did allude to certain things, with certain
used for mind control is really what you're referring to.
Yeah. And that is, I mean, art is being used, has been being used as something to control the masses. And certainly it's like on hyper speed now. It's like, this psychotic hyper version of mind control now, with how they're using the woke agenda and like modern political art. And none of these, it's not the city going to an artist going, I want you to create something beautiful for our city because I've seen your work and I think it's wonderful. It's the city going to an artist going, I'll pay you this to make this,
right,
to put in the city. And that's where it starts to like cross that,
right,
line. And with the thing with like using art for stuff like propaganda, it's easy for people to connect to art. It's easy for people to emotionally connect with art, because even if that art has no real value, because like even if it's like a cartoon and some crazy stuff is happening, those people aren't real. It's not real. It's a fantasy. It's fake. So in that cartoon, say it's like a old cartoon, and they're like, they're warring against each other. You've got, who is it, like Bugs Bunny and the hunter. and they're warring against each other, and like you can connect with that, and you can condone it, and you can accept it as even funny, and you can emotionally connect with that and be like, oh, and that's great, because nobody's actually going to get hurt. Nobody's going to there's not going to be a negative consequence to the other party, because it isn't real, it's fantasy. But it can portray, with cartoons and comic strips and posters and movies and whatever, actual situations, and be based off or inspired of actual situations that are happening in the real world.
Yeah.
Even video games do it. And the only thing I would say about that is, like, I have necessarily no problem with any of that kind of artwork, or even video games or anything. It's just like, don't turn it into real life in your head. Remember, it's just for fun. Don't take it seriously, and certainly don't let it control how you're going to view reality.
And then there's
Especially when
the unconscious aspects of symbolism in art, right? And I know, we have folks in the natural law community who talk a lot about, symbols and sigils, Brandon Martin and Nate Capp, for example, come to mind, of really highlighting how important it is to kind of learn about the symbolism, so that when it's being used as a mind control tool or a weapon to move your consciousness or your behavior in a certain direction.
Yeah. And what I was gonna say is just, certain things, even like some of these cartoons, it's like we can learn through these things through the apophatic, method of just like, okay, distinguishing, what is a right by observing what is wrong, like how people are, causing harm upon other people or even onto themselves and this and that, and like have that inspire people to find a better way of living. Like, we don't have to fucking live like this. Or have it be, either an allegory through that story or episode or cartoon, little comic, humor, whatever, artful piece, even these memes nowadays. And people, I've got to understand, you ain't gonna learn life's lessons through memes, like I see people trying to act like, everything's about the meme, and like there's so much to gain from that, but you got to maintain much deeper through the roots of, what that pertains to, and the research that people delved through to even come up with that information to begin with. But as far as like allegories, there's many different ways to tell stories through metaphors and this and that, which is what people it can go over people's heads. And that's why, like, other people, like parents, if you're having your kids watch certain things, like try to like catch up to them and just like ask questions, like just be like openly curious, like, hey, what did you think about this? And like kind of like lead them towards like having them open up towards what they might think towards certain aspects of the film that are towards the betterment of one's own self, psychology, all that stuff, starting from the mentalism and all that stuff. So yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like if a kid is watching something and they have enough wherewithal, no matter the age, because some kids develop a little bit faster than others. You shouldn't say, oh, my kid's 8, so they're too dumb to understand anything. That's not necessarily the case for kids. They all develop in different ways. You just have to be, observant with how your child is developing naturally. But I feel like if a kid has enough wherewithal within their own mind to even inquire or be curious about something, then they have enough capability of understanding a truthful answer, even if that truthful answer is kind of like weird, or maybe it's, I don't know, like just something maybe you would have kept from them, a couple more years, like don't go having the birds and the bees talk with them, as a 6-year-old. But, I mean, like, when my daughter was like 12 years old and she's like, well, somebody came to school today and they were talking about, alcohol. And I'd be like, okay, well, what do you want to know about it? And, and then she'd tell me, well, talking about how, dad's getting drunk every night. And I'm like, okay, so then what? And I'd find out whatever the whole situation was that the kid observed. And if they had a specific question, well, what's so wrong with that? What does alcohol do? And it's like, well, and then you answer the question as best as you possibly can. Maybe there's nothing really particularly wrong with dad having a beer after dinner. But then all in moderation, and then they're like, well, you know, they have like tons and tons and tons of beers from what they told me. And like, well, some adults make that decision, but it's not necessarily a wise decision. So maybe think about that and then put those thoughts together and come back to me. So we can't, with my own kid, if she asked me a question, she had enough in her to be like, I'm really curious about this subject, that subject, this kind of thing, that kind of thing. And she could formulate that thought enough in her head to ask me a question, then I was comfortable with answering the question. But this is, when it comes to symbolism and stuff like that, and what your kids are watching, it's always very good to just be observant and understand, watch it with them, or at least know what they're watching, don't
ask
just
questions
and ask questions on like what they think they're taking in, and like don't just plop them in front of an iPad and turn Netflix on, because you don't even know what's going to come on there. It could be like an episode of Cuties or whatever that show was. And like, you want to be paying attention to what they're actually taking in, because it's still art. It's a form of, it's what art is being used for, is things like this that are maybe not so appropriate for children. And, the thing is like, they know that when the younger you get them, the easier it is to own them.
For sure.
And it doesn't matter. It won't matter what guidance the parents are trying to give, even if the parents are vigilant, it won't matter, because they got them. They got them at
so
2, 3,
my
4
question
years
to you
old.
right now, where do you see children, learning in school within the next 5 to 10 years? With, everything being, I mean, you guys been to school in the public domain, maybe not, maybe so, I don't know. But as far as my experience, like, yeah, like growing up, like, oh, we had this influx of Apple computers all up in the library all of a sudden. So like, I don't know if our school was just like sponsored by Apple or whatever and all this stuff. So is it going to be the same type of scenario where, kids in like 5 years are all going to have, like the Facebook Meta, whatever they call it, the virtual reality, augmented reality, whatever goggles, where people are going to like look for that?
I'm sure it would go down a path like that if people refuse to maybe put the brakes on some of the madness that's going on. I mean, I went to public school, and I got kind of a fragmented education in grade school. And when I was a kid, we did things like home ec and stuff. But as I went through grade school 1 through 12, little things started being taken out. This was taken out. This was taken out. Certain programs were taken out. And then even today, like in California, a lot of schools, I think, they don't even have art. They don't even have science class. And if the parents want a science class for their kids, then the parents have to pay extra out of pocket for a science teacher. Things like that is going on in California. I'm like, man, I'm glad my kid is
Or they're over
But
focusing on science, like the STEM programs, where it's all like
right, yeah.
technological, you know, robotics and science based, and then they're at the exclusion of art and you know, physical
Yeah.
exercise, and even language arts and history get really diluted,
Yeah.
you know.
Like I think it was a while ago. I mean, they tried to do Ebonics as a language in school, and I'm like, oh Jesus Christ.
Well, do text lingo.
So,
That's the new language.
or yeah,
We'll
now it's
learn.
going to be like how to emoji. You know, it's like,
Yeah.
dude, this is
Or
why
never to
we're
spell.
this is why we're like becoming illiterate. Like, you know,
Right.
you know, we're not just illiterate in our language, our written and spoken language. We're illiterate in our emotional,
Yeah.
artistic language. And so like with schools, if people don't start kind of figuring out how to pay attention and to what's happening with their kids, it's going to be like kids in like some dystopian future, and they're all in cubicles with like VR goggles on, and you know, nobody's touching or talking to each other. Everybody's just in this virtual fantasy realm and learning whatever is being programmed into that computer, instead of having, you know, one-on-one conversations with your peers and your mentors, which is a different, entirely different environment. And when you've got a sort of the dystopian type of version of schooling, everybody comes out like, I would say maybe private schools would focus on the, you know, they're trying to get the like upper class level of psychopaths, you know, who will continue the cycle, and they'll focus on things that like sciences, maths, and, you know, focus it on like in a very materialistic atheist kind of educational format. And then you've got the grade school, public school education system, which is churning out golems and, you know, children who really, a lot of them can't do anything outside of anything, you know, like they're active. It's more about sports. So then they're all set up to go and do things like military or whatever, and be soldiers behind a computer, soldiers out in the real world, you know.
You're not talking
So
about keyboard warriors, are you?
no.
Sorry.
Well,
I
I
couldn't
mean, like,
resist that. Sorry.
How would you, I guess, what would you recommend to parents in terms of how they support or encourage their child in related to art and creativity?
well, it should first all come from love and, you know, an appropriate amount of empathy and truth always, and encouragement, of course. However, I mean, I wouldn't say that, like, say your kid comes to you and they're 5 years old and they're like, oh, well, you know, they're like a little girl and they're like, I feel like a boy. And it's like, well, you know, you're not. Um, but it's like, you know, don't encourage them to the point where they like destroy their bodies. You know, that's the only issue that I have with that. But, you know, as far as creative expression goes, nobody should be fiddling and messing around with little tiny human bodies. I mean, when you're an adult, by all means, do whatever you want with your body. But as little kids, you know, who are trying to find themselves, there are little kids, you know, they instinctively are creating through instinct. It's all self-expression, really, because they're new and like everything's new and everything's bright and shiny and exciting. So the things that come into their world, you know, you as the steward, it's good to guide them, but also encourage them into, you know, truth, morality, ethics. And when it comes to art, if they want to paint, let them paint. Mm-hmm. If they want to digitally draw, get them a tablet. I mean, they're not that expensive, you know, even if, you know, parents don't have a lot of money. I mean, you could get a drawing digital tablet for like $100. you know, and
Mhm.
there's a lot of programs that will even donate them to young kids who are artists, and you know, encourage them to be creative as much as they can be. Like if they, you know, want to write, you know, it's just it's all got to come from love though. But I think a lot of parents might take that to a point where, okay, my kid is having an interest in this type of thing, so now that's all my kid is interested in.
Mhm.
And you want to make sure that you don't pigeonhole that kid into one thing. Maybe they'll do it and they don't like it in a few months, and they figure out, you know, it's not really for them. You know, so you tried, you know, life, you can't really think about the money for that kind of stuff. You know, I don't really. It's like you invest a little bit and maybe they didn't like it, and you're like, oh well, you know,
Mhm.
it's the same amount of money you would invest in going to art school. So just
Encourage
make
yeah, experimentation and just like
right,
following their creative like desire to make something, right? And not be super
right,
micromanaging or tell them that they should be doing it a different way or right.
right. You know, it's like some of these. I saw a disturbing trend where parents who notice some artistic streaks in their children are doing things like wanting to turn them into something physically that they're not.
Oh wow.
And this this is like bordering into it's unethical, it's immoral, and it's all about the parents and not the child.
Mhm.
And this is what's bothering me the most about art, is that it's being used as this weapon to destroy our future.
Mm.
And it's hitting on all fronts, and our kids are the target, and it's working because people aren't saying no loud enough, I guess, or physically enough.
Mhm.
However
Mhm.
it is, it's like, you know, if your kid is interested in art, get them a notebook and some coloring pencils and some drawing pencils, spend a couple $100, buy them some art supplies of whatever they like, but don't try to make them something that they're
They're
not,
not. Yeah.
based off of some kind of trend that's happening in the current
Right.
world.
Yeah, or your own agenda for them that you see, oh, this is something that would create a career for them. So let's push them this way. Or
Right.
they could be a football player and I want my child to be that. So I'm going to push them that way. Right. But
Right.
maybe less pressure, less force, allow the natural, organic process of experimentation and things like that. It's so I got lost a thought on there. Yeah.
If you don't mind, I'll just say that observational thing. I'm interested on what both of you have to say upon it, but so there's two different polarities, if you will. There's an energy, you know, through, you know, what you guys are talking about, the whole, you know, encouraging kids to go through one path or another path. And one seems to be, you know, building one's energy up and one's will force towards, you know, a certain craft or whatever, a life path, whatever. Or there's another one that's kind of feeding off of that energy in a parasitic way, which is more like this mainstream trend of this dystopian type of trajectory of, you know, yeah, this AI, you know, transhumanist timeline, which is not sustainable at all, because it's not creative, it's not heart-based intelligent, it's not going to be building towards something progressive and that can have some life, self-sustaining life, perpetual energy behind it all, not just something that has to derive from other, you know, life sources to, you know, create whatever is deriving that from, if you will. Any thoughts on that?
I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I mean, as far as I can see it, AI art, AI generated art, anything that comes out of that, anything that is like a conformist or conformity type of art, then it isn't real art. I mean, there is a difference between real art and not real art, and it's fantasy, you know. I mean, even if you're an authentic artist and you draw fantasy, at least it's coming from you. That's what makes it authentic. It's some sort of a spiritual message you're trying to portray. Um, but it's like AI generated art can only create a falsity. It's not coming from anything alive. Like I
What
was
what do you, how would you describe like the value of not losing that organic artistic process? Why is that so important for humanity? I don't think people recognize that this is an important thing, you know?
yeah. I think if we ever get to a stage in our physical reality where art is no longer coming from the individual, then we're going to be in actual trouble. Like, I don't look at things in terms of, all these industries are encroaching on us, the government's encroaching on us, and telling us how to live our lives and we're running out of time. I don't really look at it in terms like that, because I see reality as this wave of forever continuing. It'll go on forever, and it's this wave of up and down going on through time. And it's getting darker and darker in the sense that, spirit is a creative force, and we are the paintbrushes in the physical manifestation. So when we shut down our, what's inside of us, when we shut down that spirit, that fraction of spirit within us, we can no longer be in reality. Like, we can't create anymore. Mm-hmm. So we're just going to be golems, all of us, and I do think it's important to encourage artistic, being creative, not in the sense where you're drawing or whatever. I mean, art comes in so many different forms, but just to express yourself in some sort of creative format, and to do it authentically. And if we shut down that part of us that's coming from spirit, it's going to die and it's going to rot. And we're going to turn into we're going to be like a herd of then we're actually going to be slaves.
And the living dead.
We're the walking dead. We'll be the walking dead. We're just we have no thought and emotion. It's all action. But we don't, according to the people who are creating that kind of world, we don't need thought and emotion. We're the bottom of the barrel. We don't need those things.
That all action, that's the onslaught of the divine feminine, where there's lack of balance, right? There's too much yang up in that thing. But Leslie, any thoughts on what I mentioned and what Sarah just spoke about?
Yeah, I to me it's very much about the holding on to our individuality and our rights as well, like, because it's like if you become a follower and not a creator, then you're sort of letting go of yourself and your own I guess your sovereignty and the value of your sovereignty. If you don't value art, you're not valuing your sovereignty.
Right.
I think they go hand in hand.
And you're not valuing reality or the future.
Yeah, it's like allowing a false like veil of someone else's vision to take over your world, and then just living in their little false reality, as opposed to because you become compliant and very much based in the pleasure principle, which is how they're hooking people in, right? Because, beauty is captivating, but and things can be very beautiful and like high stimulation, like Disneyland, Or I was thinking about, and I wanted to ask you this question, like, there's a trend I see where they're taking artists like George O'Keeffe, Vincent van Gogh, and they're creating these highly interactional shows that they're calling, like, instead of their art being shown, it's like this high-tech interaction, which they're basing it off their art, but it's not really their art anymore. What is your thought about that?
I suppose it's just somebody trying to create a new spin off something old, which I suppose is not a bad thing. But I mean, it doesn't have any value. But I know what you're talking about. I think I've seen those, like, these virtual,
they've been
interactive
popular
exhibitions, and there's no value there. There's no.
It's like about the
insight
stimulation, because our society's become so used to like this intensive, high
Instant
energy,
gratification,
instant
dopamine
gratification,
satisfaction.
big dopamine
Yep.
hits, right? And like these kind of base senses being stimulated. And then that's, then people don't want to take the time to read or to really appreciate the details of a painting. It becomes like kids don't have the patience for that when they're used to all this like stimulating stuff. I think it's pulling them away.
It's the instant information. And like, here's the thing that I wanted to get your inputs on as well, in regards to the enormity of the exponentiality of information being spewed out, or just like the graphics, the media, anything that's going to be coming out in the next, right now, today, in the next couple of years, of how, even movies, Chat GPT or whatever the hell, like there's going to be movies or whatever, TV shows that are going to be scripted by fucking AI or some shit like that, or just like people pumping in keywords to create scripts and text for things, even newscasts, people reading off of teleprompters, all this stuff. So how can we deviate the real from the fake and all this stuff? And like people even listening to us right here, right now, like, who thinks that we're like real and authentic and all this, and like, do we even fucking matter or whatever? But we're gonna be here standing firm on solid foundational principles that we've delved through years and years of, to get to this point, to be able to speak upon these solid foundations of truth, and through our observations, and realize that yes, there is a fine definitive difference of what is spoken through that breath of the soul, or through just some artificial algorithmic whatever, right?
Soulless. It's like soul versus soulless, really.
Yeah.
It's like, and I'm thinking of it from the standpoint of being a counselor, helping people to slow down, get away from the external voices and stimuli and old scripts, and to come internal, right? To be able to be in full presence, and to become more aware of the subtleties of your own inner messaging, of your body, the wisdom in your body and the wisdom in your soul. And when this, I think that the trend is to pull people away from that. And so if I'm looking at a beautiful piece of art, then I'm having kind of a relationship with it. And if I'm in presence, I'm noticing how it's affecting me, right? And how I feel about it is like an emotional aspect. And I think that gets missing when it's just about stimulation. And I bet, like, I'm starting to pay more attention to especially faces, and in like our advertisements and on like Facebook or whatever. And and even on the news, I don't usually watch it, but if I go in a business or something and the news is on, I'm looking and I'm like, they're deviating their bodies and their eyes. That I'm starting to see that is not a real human. Those eyes are not human. And I think that if we are attuned to ourselves and paying attention to the subtle energetic pieces, we're going to know what's real and what's not. And I think that's a skill that we want to cultivate for everyone. So we're not so easily duped and tricked, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say first, you can really only help those who are looking for guidance and looking for help, who've asked for it. Some people, they're not ready for anything that we have to say. They're just not ready for it, spiritually. But I mean, yeah, I mean, it's easy to turn the volume off or turn the volume down off of the inner self. That's easy to do. That's why it's done. That's why it's programmed in our educational system and every institution. Like, you got to turn the volume all the way down on that, on spirit, so you can't even listen to yourself. And I think I kind of, I mean, even though I had the same kind of educational upbringing, you know, like I went to public school, you know, I moved around a lot. I didn't, you know, have any great formal or training on anything really. It's, I think I kind of sat outside of that a little bit because I spent so much time alone on my own. The only person to actually communicate with was myself. So I was able to get some, you know, the volumes, which was not turned down all the way for me. And I was able to, you know, as I got older with more experience, I learned how to turn the volume back up. And, you know, I'm not saying experience matters with that, or age matters. I mean, I would say, I wouldn't say age matters as far as how we develop spiritually or personally as an individual or whatever. I would say it's the experiences that we go through, and everybody's experience is a little bit different. But yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to have it shut off very easily. I mean, it can never go away, but it's easy to turn it down. It's easy to cut yourself. It's easy to be cut off from that spiritual side of you, you know, your daemon, as it might be called.
And if there's like judgment around like what is good art, like, you know, the AI stuff can look super impressive, right? That I imagine a lot of people would be like, why should I even bother? I can't get anything close to that level of precision.
Right.
And so it's just sort of like people, I may just not even go there, you know?
Right. I mean, that's definitely like, I don't know if that's done on purpose or not, you know, because some of the AI generated art, it's just exciting, you know, and it's bright and it's beautiful. And it like you're saying, it's a lot of intensity, and that's very attractive. That's very attractive to people, you know, the excitement of what you're viewing. But I mean, I guess it never affected me. I mean, it affects most people like that. That's like, you know, conditioning, but it didn't affect me too much. You know, I didn't look at something that was visually stimulating and going, oh, that's amazing. You know, sometimes, you know, I was more like, well, you know, garbage is garbage. You know, it doesn't matter how colorful it is. You know, I get like a little bit more real about it. But then, you know, I look at somebody like Todd Lockwood, I think that's his name, Todd Lockwood, who's an artist. And I'm like, he's, I mean, if you ever look him up, he's like a damn good artist. You're like, every artist who's actually trying to learn how to draw, you're like, you know, that's the kind of skill level, that's the kind of artist you go, I'm gonna do something else.
Yeah.
You know, I don't look at, say, like the exhibitions you were talking about, where it's like taking our classical artists and making this like just weird visual stimulating experience, you know, gallery. I don't look at that and go, oh, this is discouraging as an artist, I'd just be like, oh, well, I could have done this, you know, like, is this all I have to do to make my artwork popular?
Right, right.
It's just,
I think
so.
I think the manipulation of time kind of is related too in all this, because to really make art, you need time.
Yeah,
And
very
in
cool.
the way our lifestyles being pressured to always make money and pay bills, like many of us, including myself, like I haven't put energy other than like creating presentations, which is, I think, a creative process, but it's like fighting for time. That's a one of the things against the art. Yeah.
And that's one of these polarities where I can see like the animosity between like real artists and others that are just, plugging in some words in a couple minutes. They're gonna get some computer generated images that are gonna fit their needs.
Be quick.
And this goes out to every single person that are putting out, those types of images on their, YouTube or whatever, video platform, video thumbnails, right? So they could be like da 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 da, da, and there you go. And like there's artists that are being acquired to like draw certain things up, and that takes a lot more time than just some instant gratification thing that the Gen Zs and Shmees are used to. And that's nothing against them, but like y'all are talking about, like, so people are growing up and we're subjected to a variety of different things, and so much that's going on in the real world and digital world, and how to decipher through the both of those and distinguish the real from the fucking fake. And also like understanding how everyone is subjected to varying degrees and how they go through that and navigate through that through their own individual ways of that. So it's hard to generalize on all this stuff and in through everyone's daily lives, interacting with these people. Like, how are we supposed to, there's no generalization that's gonna, or a template that's gonna be so fitting to any kind of situation sometimes, which is why it's so great to have the mind like an umbrella where it's best used when open.
Well, I would say what's happened is that patience has been bred out of the majority. No longer is the virtue of patience being valued or
Instant
encouraged
gratification.
or taught. And patience is key to everything in our lives, not just, waiting for the Amazon truck or whatever, patience with yourself, patience with who you are, developing who you are, why you are, how you are, and what you're going to do with what you are.
And learning a skill, to learn to be an expert,
to learn a skill.
Illustrator.
Yeah, exactly. And like all these people, like, that's what I'm saying. It's better, like, an authentic artist might produce 2, 3, 4 pieces, maybe even one piece in their entire life that actually has real value because it came fully from themselves, their inner selves. Like Leonardo da Vinci, I talked a little bit about this with Brandon Spencer, was that Leonardo da Vinci, he did many, many pieces of artwork. Most of them he never finished. And he did a lot of commissions and he taught students and everything, but his, grand piece was the Mona Lisa. As from what I can see, that might be. And the Mona Lisa, my personal theory from some of the research I've done, he spent the majority of his life working on the Mona Lisa. Like, it was originally meant to be some kind of commission, I think, for somebody, for a merchant's wife, and then it turned into something else. And then he's like, no, I'm going to keep it. I've got other things I want to say with it. And he he, I mean, he was working on that piece for the majority of his life. He had
Wow.
that piece with him and he carried it around with it until it was finished.
I had no idea. That's fascinating.
Yeah. So one of the things, like, you know, also for people who want to encourage their youth who are, you know, artistically inclined, let them be like however they're going to be artistic naturally.
Yeah.
Don't, you know, be like, okay, you want to do this, and this. Don't do that.
Yeah,
Let
you're
them
right.
let them come out and say what they're gonna do. You
Yeah.
know, don't try to, that's what I'm saying, like, don't try to turn them into something they're not, because, you know, there's a popularity trend going on of this, that, or the other thing, or because you think that just because somebody likes to draw that they should like be, you know, pigeonholed into a corner of being an artist, you know.
Right.
it,
Or a
it, it just
graphic artist, because that's where you can make money, right?
right, exactly. It's like, you know, I don't want to do advertising,
Mm-hmm.
so why, I don't want to do graphic art, you know. So like, but that was kind of where I was being, you know, pushed into, was graphic
Right.
design school, just because that's where the money's at. And if you go to graphic design school and you become an advertiser and do art for advertisement companies, you're going to make big money, sure, but it doesn't have any value. So it depends on like where you're, like the person you want to be too. Like, do you want to be somebody in that realm where it's like about money and it's about that kind of fame and status or whatever, you know, popularity? Or do you want something that's actually like, do you actually want to speak your own language?
Do you
So,
think that, let's say someone really has a natural desire to make art, and then they get that pressure or that idea to go into an art career of some sort, like, or do you think that that kind of messes with a person's ability to make authentic art, you know, having tried to do
yeah,
both? Yeah.
because it's like it's like a form of peer pressure.
Yeah.
So like when I was a kid, I was interested in art. So what kind of gifts and stuff did I get from others? I got art supply crap.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, you know, I like other things. You know, it's just,
Right.
you know, it's so
Yeah.
it's like I have other interests besides like wanting to draw,
Yeah.
you know, and
Develop the
it's
whole person, and like the books you give them or the other things may
it's just
really build their art, you know?
right. They're a full human being.
Yeah.
So treat them like one.
Yeah, good
Don't
point.
treat them like, oh, they're really into, you know, bugs, so they're going to be a scientist and then focus on that. Or they're
Right.
really into drawing cartoons, so they're going to be an animator and then focus on that. Or
Yeah, you're
they're
so right. It's like the
they're
compartmentalization of our world gets pressured in putting people in these little like pathways, you know, little
yeah,
And
I
that's a
tunnels.
whole
mean,
nother episode for Dissolving the
I
Divide regarding like all
know.
these obligatory, you know, gift giving holidays and birthdays,
Yeah.
and sometimes in the worst ways, but sometimes in the best. But let's leave it to rest for now.
Yeah.
As far as getting back to the
And I am just, you know, I'm getting close to running out of time myself here.
oh
So
yeah, no worries. Yeah,
it might
yeah.
be good to give us some summarizing statements.
And I would love to hear the solution-oriented versions of those. And
Yeah.
Sarah, I'll let you take the floor on all that.
Yeah.
so a solution on how to combat
Like,
what the art industry is doing,
yeah, I guess that's a good
or
one. I mean, you've talked about what parents can do. I think that's solution oriented. But what else can, you know, would you like the public to be thinking about to keep true, authentic art alive, and to bring back the maybe the knowledge of the holistic nature of art, you know?
well, if you want to, if you want to encourage authenticity, and authentic art and the truest self, then you've got to lead by example. I feel like it's really important how we behave and conduct ourselves is going to rub off on even the strangers in our environment. And they're going to see a certain type of thing in front of them because people are visually activated and they respond to visual triggers more than they do verbal ones, I think. So it's just be honest and truthful with yourself and don't shut yourself off. Don't turn the volume off on your inner self. Like if you have, that's what our hearts and our guts are, they speak a language to us if we're listening to our bodies, our souls will speak to us if we listen to it. And if you allow the outside influences that we have today to be louder than your inner language, then you're gonna get lost. So I would say that people should not focus so much on what's happening outside of them. And they should, pay attention because that's prudent to pay attention, when you're crossing the street and whatnot. But don't be paying attention to what other people think should be happening, especially with you. And if they feel, oh, you should be doing this, words are just words. It doesn't matter what people think you should be doing. It matters what, you think you should be doing. It matters.
Yeah, the message that's compelling you to speak or to create, right?
Yeah, don't let external forces overrun your instinct.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, it's like artists make art, musicians make music, right? Let's just keep expressing and being creative. No, it's valuable.
And let it happen naturally.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah. Anything else that you want to add, Derek? You're a music lover. I know that that's been a really key art for you.
Yeah, and there are concerns about the future of where music's headed. Of course, there's been ghostwriters for decades. That's nothing new. But if you if you didn't know, I have done a music video, audiovisual type of, it's like a documentary in and of itself, but through music, songs, talking about this whole AI dilemma. It's called Transhumanism Rising, the technocratic Decepticon something or other. But there's so much from what media has had to offer over the past couple of decades in and of itself of forewarning, even like books and movies, derived from books and all these things. And like even like Marvel Avengers, like Age of Ultron, where there's like trying to bring to life, some computer amalgamated, like sentient life form, kind of like a Jarvis, whatever. Like, so you see like the positive and the negative side of things. Like, I'm not gonna dismiss the complete, utter like, oh, AI is all bad. Although like there's some things that need to be understood beyond what the mainstream is selling everyone in regards to all the benefits and this and that, and even the other side claiming all the conspiratorial side of things, because beyond that veil there are just things beyond this world that have existed that include AI that I just need to mention. It's just beyond this, human construct, what people even fathom to believe in this, current space-time continuum. and what humans have, included and incorporated and, built up upon any kind of digital, alpha, beta, delta, gamma, whatever kind of grammar that has been, placed upon this planet. Anyways, I hope people can enter, under, and overstand it to whatever degree that they're capable of implementing in their lives and navigating through this reality, and not being succumbed to like this negative side of all this artificial intelligence that can make us irrelevant in a sense.
I agree with you, Derek. I mean, I don't necessarily think AI or technology or anything is necessarily evil. It's a tool. It's about how it's being used. And if you mishandle it, it's going to be misused, and we're going to end up in some sort of hellhole, Nazi, technocratic, dystopian future. But AI has its usefulness, I mean,
we can use it as a tool.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, like I think years ago, an example of it, it was like a virtual AI thing, that surgeons in med school that were using for a while. And it's this like virtual program that's all written and able to, do AI stuff. I don't know.
Maybe like surgery, maybe it's a training device.
And it was putting the student in a place visually where they think they're doing surgery on a human, but it isn't real. It's just practice. So it's just a tool, and it can be used for its purposes. But, at the same time, people need to realize it's a tool. So just like any other tool, you can, like any fork, you can either use your fork to eat your dinner with, or you can stab someone in the neck with it. It's a tool. Like, choose wisely.
So and then that brings me to, I guess, my final thought on this is how important it is for us to develop our discernment, and to learn to discern. We really need to be aware of ourselves and our responses in our body system, because this, I think, has a lot to do with vibration, the vibratory energy of things, and we can start to feel and discern between the vibration of things and understand. Like, I think of the music, I see a lot right now people responding to singers and musicians who are just playing music with their pure voice, with an old guitar. Or I just posted something on Facebook of these young kids doing like an old Leonard Skinner song, like totally just sort of authentic without, changing, auto tuning and all of that. And people are responding really well to this. People like it. And I think it's because they can feel a difference. It's a different vibratory feeling. And so that's the more that we're able to help people to notice the difference is going to be really key. Because if artists don't create and all people are getting is the sort of empty vibration, they're not going to know the difference. But we can help, I think, touch people's hearts through art, and awaken people's consciousness through real authentic art. So I think it's a really important conversation, and I'm really glad that you brought it to the table, Sara. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me talk about it.
Yeah, looking forward to more conversations. And
so would you like to mention where people can find you, Sara? I know you've been on a couple platforms with a couple guests, but I know you might have your own website with your own works and your own art, where even on Etsy, anything like that. So I've got a link tree that people can go to at Sara Cross Art. That's Sara with no H. So Sara Cross Art is my link tree, and it has all of my work, whether it be, I have a sewing channel where, to teach people sewing videos on YouTube and Odyssey. I have a Rumble and Odyssey channel.
for talking about subjects like this. You know, if I get into a mood of something that's triggering me. And I've been on there's a couple of other links there for other events and other shows for some great content creators that I've been able to have the pleasure in working with. And I have an Etsy page if anybody wants to, and I have a buy me a coffee platform where I can do commissions for people if they're looking for some sort of a gift or something special for themselves. And I have an Etsy page where I have a lot of the things that I post up that I currently have available, including the book that I published this year, along with some t-shirts and stuff that can go with it.
Great. It's prolific. Lots of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, she has some cool t-shirts.
Health inclined things. Yeah, t-shirts. Inquire with her about, certain customized attire as well.
Yeah.
All
right.
Well.
All right. So I guess we'll close up another edition of Dissolving the Divide. Thank you, Sara and Derek, and we'll catch you the next time.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye. Excellent. So good. Thank you. I'm gonna end the Zoom so the recording will process, and we'll catch y'all later.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye, Derek.
Yes, that was awesome. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.